The alarms were set to chime like wind bells, not sirens. Commodore Naomi Reese wanted her bridge calm while they stole 10,000 souls out from under an embargo. The freighter-turned-flagship Murmuration drifted sideways through the Pharaoh's corridor, hull disguised as a ragged ribbon of ice and slag. Above them, the Aurelian Accord's picket line burned clean blue in the dark, a perfect geometry built to shame messy species into obedience. "Barnacle Run is green," her nav said. On the tactical holo, 40 civilian scows clung to Murmuration's flanks, heat signatures braided into one uneven smear. They looked like debris hugging a bigger piece of debris. In a different century, people called this Dunkirk, 1,000 small boats threading a throat while giants argued about maps. In this one, the giants wrote embargo codes and called it peace. "Neutrino soft ping," Naomi ordered. The comms team tapped out a rhythm the Accord scanners wouldn't parse, prime intervals, then pauses like breath. Old human trick, hide in the noise, talk with patterns. She'd learned it from a Navajo linguist on Ceres who laughed and said that some messages weren't meant for empires. The refugee moon Aster rolled beneath, ash-gray and cratered. Its domes flickered low, ration power. Accord law said stabilization custody. Naomi called it a polite word for kidnapping. "All cutters launch," she said. "No transponders. If you see a patrol beam, play dead or play stupid, your choice." A junior officer glanced up. "Ma'am, rules of engagement if they tag us." "Proportionality," Naomi said. "Shield, smoke, run. No shots unless they fire on civilians. Just war isn't a slogan." She let that hang. She believed in lines you don't cross because crossing them hollows you out. The first wave of lifters rose, bellies full of children and med pods. An Accord corvette yawed toward them, bored and efficient. Its captain saw a cluster of irregular heat and wrote "trash wake" in his mind. Then Murmuration sneezed. Thruster cones spat a mist of spun-up ice dust, and every beam in 100 kilometers lit false. The corvette swore at its own optics. The lifters slipped through like minnows. Second wave, then third. Aster's governor cried over a narrow band, voice small with relief. Naomi didn't answer. If she answered, she might promise things she couldn't guarantee, and duty wasn't built on promises. It was built on delivery. On the fourth wave, the bored corvette became a careful corvette. It pinged the debris with a warier tone. The scows shielding slouched and bled heat in the wrong pattern for rock. "They're sniffing us," Ops whispered. Naomi's jaw set. "Bridge burn in 8. Bridge burn wasn't a weapon, it was a dance. Micro-jumps chained so tight they looked like a smear, letting a convoy fold around hard space like a river around stone. A trick learned the hard way, when chemical rockets and bullets were still poetry for distance. "Commodore, we can't bridge burn with the scows latched, they'll tear." "We unlatch on 7, she said, "and catch them on 9 like handoffs on a bucket brigade." "Berlin airlift with physics," her chief engineer muttered, half prayer, half grin. The corvette finally decided to be a cop. It lit a beam, legal and bright. The beam cut along the convoy's belly and tasted metal that wasn't mineral. Naomi didn't hesitate. 7, release. The latches hissed, small ships drifted free, tumbling like confetti. 8, burn, space crumpled, their smear became a ribbon. The beam swept through where they'd been. "Accord picket is spooling missiles," Tactical said. "Ma'am, 9 catch." Tractor fields bloomed. Half the scows slammed into docking jaws with bone-rattling thuds. The other half missed and tumbled. "We'll sweep them on 11, Naomi said, throat tight. She could hear children crying through a stuck-open comm on one of the tumblers. She could hear a grandmother saying a prayer to a sea she'd never seen. Ethics lived here, not in chambers, in whether you go back for the ones who missed. 10. Nav called, "Picket missiles away." 11. Naomi said, "Catch them all." And then the bridge lights dimmed as murmuration reached for every stray hull like a mother with too few hands. Just as the Accord patrol slid in to block the only safe exit vector and painted them with a target lock that meant, "Stop, kneel, submit." "Hold formation," Naomi said, even as the lock tightened. "Trust the bucket brigade." The clock ticked toward 12. And then every plot line on the scope bent the wrong way. They made it to Hecate Reef with scorched paint and a cargo bay full of shivering families. Hecate wasn't a place so much as a cloud, a quiet drift of iron and ice hugging a brown dwarf, threaded with hidden hangars and hydroponics like lanterns in fog. The refugee quarter sang that first night, off-key and joyful, the way humans sing when their lungs still remember vacuum. The delegation from the Silicate Choir arrived at dawn cycle, 3 bodies of living crystal that refracted the weak light into geometry Naomi felt in her teeth. Translator pads struggled. The choir preferred harmonics felt through hull, but they tried words for courtesy. "Your messy courage," said the one who introduced themselves as Court of Dawn, "resonates across sorrow. We would braid with you." Dr. Kamau Amandi, chief of materials, couldn't help himself. "Braid as in growth templates, you can sing structure." Court of Dawn's facets brightened. "We shape lattice with attention. Your kind carries a fast attention." They glanced at Naomi. "You think in pivots, that is useful." Naomi laughed, then didn't. "You were on our side of the embargo." "We were beneath everyone's feet," the choir said. "Crystals do not vote. We remember pressure, not law." The wanderer caravans arrived next. Yellow-white ships like stacked harbors, captained by aunties and uncles who'd seen every customs trick the Accord could invent. They brought kelp whiskey and spare bearings and gossip. They brought a petition, form a commons, charter, rights, obligations, not an empire, a promise. They wrote it on a table stained with coolant and coffee. Clause 1, no forced labor ever. Clause 2, proportionality in all fights. Clause 3, open tech except where it endangers the weak. Naomi signed last, commanders should sign last. It wasn't romance, it was logistics dressed in ethics. The civil rights movement had run on logistics, buses, bail, bodies that showed up. Armadas do too. The dust monks of the outer belt shuffled in bearing an old thing, a spine of carved stone rippled with ancient notches. "Gate bones," their abbot said. "We think they are maps." Amandi's teams fed the patterns into simulators. Lattices woke. Space hummed like a plucked string and opened a pupil the size of a city. "Not hyperspace," Amandi breathed. "A bridge no one's used in recorded Accord charts." Naomi stared into the pupil and saw her face come back from too near. "We tested on an empty vector," she said. "We don't tear a hole through someone's kitchen." "Sing with us," Court of Dawn asked. "Human attention must be in the loop." They assembled a skiff grafted with crystal ribs. Naomi pressed her palm to the cold facet and thought of every river bridge she'd ever walked as a child, of trusting human hands that built a path because someone needed to cross. The pupil dilated. The skiff slid through and popped back into existence 3 light-years away beside a husk star, wholly intact, instruments cheerful. They cheered in 3 languages and a chord. The cheer died when Patrol 7 reported a thin knife of drive signature at the edge of the reef. A chord, but masked. "They found us," Ops said. They've sniffed a rumor, Naomi corrected. There's a difference. She needed to believe the difference still existed. The reef dimmed. Wanderer tugs shut shutters, mothers hushed children, the silicate choir dimmed their bodies to basalt. Naomi watched the knife signature hesitate, prodding, then arc away, unsatisfied. The reef exhaled. "Commander," Amandi said in the quiet after, "gate bones scale. We can move more than skiffs. How much more?" Amandi didn't smile. "How much do you need?" Naomi didn't answer. She walked the refugee quarter and let children tug at her sleeve and let someone press a bowl of soup into her hand and remembered that all grand strategy is measured against this. A warm meal, a door that shuts, a sleep without fear. She returned to the bridge with an answer. "We'll need a fleet." "And a reason," her XO said softly. "The reason's already here," Naomi said. She marked the first convoy route on a map no empire owned. They called the new hulls Larkspur class because Amandi liked how the flower looked in old Earth photos, spikes of color in hard soil. The choir sang ribs into growth vats while human welders argued about clearances and the wanderers argued about galas. "If you want people to fight together," Fleet Auntie Lael said, "you feed them well and you label the spice tins." Training hurt. Braided jumps looked like jazz on paper and like chaos in vacuum. Pilots overshot. Tugs kissed too hard. Naomi bruised her shoulder, catching herself when murmuration bucked wrong in a simulator, and laughed at her own unglamorous body remembering gravity. She quoted Epictetus in a briefing, "Control what's yours to control," and realized later that she sounded like a prayer. News filtered from the Accord frontier, mines run by custodial charter, families relocated to instructional camps. The language did the usual work of sanding edges off cruelty. It always had. Midway had been decided by luck folded into discipline. This would be decided by whether they believed their own euphemisms less than the council believed theirs. The contact came from an unexpected vector, a war champion of the Rock clans, General Harkin, his 4 eyes steady in the half-light, his voice gravel. "Commodore Reese, I saw your convoy at Faroes. I counted how many slower ships you turned back to catch. We were told humans were clever but soft. We were told wrong." He offered intelligence, patrol rotations, refit cadences, the way Accord admirals thought in grids they mistook for the galaxy. "Why?" Naomi asked, blunt. "Strength without honor is cruelty," Harkin said, "and I am tired of being cruel for men who speak of order while their hands are in people's pockets." He sent proof, a live feed from an instructional camp that looked like a mine with nicer fonts. "Trust is an economy. You spend it or you hoard it, and either way you pay." Naomi spent. They planned a raid to cut the camp's backbone and walk their people out. The plan hinged on a gatebone node under the camp's mountain, a maintenance conduit the Accord thought was a decorative ruin. The choir could resonate it open without collapsing the ridge. The wanderers could mask the heat bloom with a convoy burn. The larkspurs could belly in under the blooming. And if the mountain falls, her XO asked. "Then we don't go," Naomi said. "Civilians' lives are not chips on a board." Harkin studied her a long time and nodded once, as if she'd passed an exam he hadn't told her she was taking. They went at night cycle. The choir's song was a tone Naomi felt in her bones, old and kind. The rock remembered being pushed once, a long time ago, and obliged. The maintenance conduit yawned like a mouth. Larkspurs slid through with their lights off. The camp's cameras watched nothing and wrote it down as routine. They were halfway through when the choir snapped a counter chord. "Echo," Court of Dawn said, edges flashing. Future harmonics reflected back. Someone in your pattern betrays. Define someone, Naomi said, too evenly. Pattern points to a voice with comfortable vowels. The choir sang, apology rippling their facets. A traitor who knows maps, not wars. A wanderer quartermaster then. Someone who sold routes because their kid ate or else. Naomi's stomach went cold. The Accord had always been good at coercion in polite fonts. On the scopes, slivers of drive wake appeared like claws flexing, a quick reaction group spooling up far too close for coincidence. Continue the pull, Naomi said. We take them now or we lose them forever. She felt the line between prudence and cowardice under her boots and put her heel on the right side. Braids ready, Nav said. On your mark. The mountain hummed, and the first alarm finally screamed. They came out with everyone breathing and the mountain still a mountain. Refugees blinked under ship lights, confused to find kindness waiting. The choir dimmed to let pupils widen. General Harkin stood watch at the ramp and did not smile, but his shoulders lowered. He sent a message to old comrades with the footage and one line. We fight for something that fights for them. Naomi didn't hunt the traitor with torches. She asked Auntie Lael to pour tea, and asked the wanderer quartermasters to bring their manifest clerks, and then waited for someone to shake. It took 12 minutes. A thin man with a tidy ledger admitted he'd handed a corridor map to a customs inspector. They had his daughter. He had done the arithmetic and decided one child outweighed a convoy of maybe people. Naomi didn't moralize. She showed him a plan. We give them maps that look true and fold wrong. We bait their net. We take their hooks out of your family's life. He cried like a muffled kettle. She let him have the privacy of his face in his hands. The false maps moved as cleanly as lies ever move. An Accord task force slashed at nothing and told a supervisor they'd disrupted a ring. The supervisor filed a perfect report. The choir laughed a crystalline laugh that sounded like rain on a tin roof. The dust monks intoned something about emptiness being a utility. Naomi tried not to enjoy any of it too much. Amandi brought numbers. At current growth, you can field 900 hulls in 16 months. If we push the vats and cut ornament, 1,000. The gate bones can carry them if we anchor at 17 nodes. We've proven we can jump formations without tearing crews apart. They'd learned to braid jumps like neighborhoods passing sandbags down a line. The analogy worked. The universe respected metaphors that were really math. Doctrine followed hardware. They drilled proportionality until people could recite it half asleep. Hit infrastructure only when it serves coercion. Protect non-combatants not as optics but as creed. Liberate capacity before land. Naomi quoted Berlin's airlift in a briefing and watched young pilots Google it in the corner of their eyes, then nod as the shape of the thing cut into them. Planes as policy, tonnage as argument. They built an information charter drafted by deckhands and philosophers at the same table. No secret police, no algorithmic blacklists, no debt peonage wearing a new hat. Harkin asked, Rye, if warriors gotta carve out for old songs about conquest. Sing them, Naomi said. Just don't make anyone else live inside them. They called the campaign Welcome Beacon because someone had to joke before fear became the only language. The beacon wasn't a siege. It was a ring. Appear over the Accord capital with weapons cold and engines hot. Broadcast the Commons Charter. Open gate bones across the rim to let camps empty and caravans run. Invite everyone with tired hands to join something that wouldn't take their names away to file them into a vault. Accord has 10,000 hulls spread thin, Harkins said. They believe in lanes, you don't. You will be everywhere and nowhere, and they will call it cheating. Then we cheat at kindness, Naomi said. Harder than they hit at order. The night before they went, Naomi walked the reef one last time. Kids slept in piles. The choir hummed a lullaby in a frequency the human ear barely knew, and welders snored sitting up. And Auntie Lael labeled 3 last spice tins because she couldn't leave a mess for her future self. Naomi touched Murmuration's hull and felt resonance hum back, a ship remembering every hand that had steadied it. Amandi swore the crystal learned with them. Naomi didn't know if that was science or comfort. She decided it was both. At 8 shower, 17 gate bones bloomed like irises. The fleet rolled through in order like a marching band that had practiced too long to miss a beat. Larkspurs, choir archers, wanderer platforms bristling with aux hospitals and kitchens that smelled like home. Harkin's Rock squadrons took the flanks, their insignia scrubbed clean of old oaths. The capital's orbitals lit with surprise, then doctrine. Doctrine said, lock targets, escalate. Naomi opened every channel. Her face went out in 1,000 frames per second to people who had been told she was a problem solved years ago. This is the Commons Armada, she said, voice steady enough that only the choir could hear her heart. We're not here to conquer, we're here to invite. You can stand down and talk, or you can shoot at neighbors who came to feed your hungry and open your cages. For a breath the sky held its breath. On her plot, 6 defense grids passed firing solutions to Central. A bureaucrat somewhere dragged a perfect slider from yellow to red because a manual said so. The first battery spun. Shields, Naomi said quietly. Hold, hold. And across the city below, lights went on in 1,000 windows as if someone had decided to stay up late to see what history looked like from the street. The first battery spun up and the city's sky glassed with blue. On Murmuration's bridge, Naomi watched targeting cones lace their formation like a net drawing tight. Hold shields at mercy, she said. Mercy was a choir word, a tuning that let incoming energy bleed harmless along ribbed crystal paths if you caught it before the spike. Catch late and you cooked crews. Defense Grid 3 is tied into municipal power, Ops said. Spin-up draws from hospitals and transit. Then they built their doctrine on hostages, Naomi said. Cord can you detune without blacking out neonatal wards. The silicate liaison brightened to a scalpel line. We can push the grid to a gentler chord, but it will taste like disobedience inside their control rooms. Sing it, Naomi said, quietly. Across orbit, harmonists aligned in the choir ships. A tone slid through metal like a hand smoothing a wrinkled sheet. On Naomi's plot, the grid's murderous sharpness softened, wattage drifting out of kill and into nuisance. Somewhere below, a night nurse blinked as her monitors stopped flickering and decided a breaker had finally behaved. A gun captain on the Accord's flagship decided mercy looked like mockery. He fired anyway. An opening salvo meant to shock, not to win. The shot hit a Wanderer platform's outer hull and bloomed into harmless sparkles along its new crystal ribs, but the impact threw a food galley sideways. Auntie Lael went down hard in a rain of spice tins, then popped up swearing in 3 dialects. We're good, she said over open channel. Put your fear back where you found it. Return communication, not fire, Naomi ordered and put Harkin's face on the Accord wideband. The Rock general did not soften his jaw. This is Harkin, son of Hes. I stand with the Commons. Warriors of the Accord, we were told we would keep order. We became men who guard cages. Stand down. I will witness you and not call you craven. Silence, then a dozen small ships powered down. Doctrine crumbled in the corners before it broke at the center. It always had. But centers break back. A second Accord group arrived hot, captained by an admiral with tidy hair and a tidy hatred for surprises. Her opening move wasn't a barrage. It was a suicide vector aimed at Gatebone Anchor 7, the iris that let the Commons bring medical ships through minute by minute. Hit the anchor and they'd collapse the bridge, do it under the grid, and it would look like Naomi's fault in the morning broadcasts. Trajectories confirm, Tactical said. They'll hit the anchor in 82 seconds. Intercept package, Naomi said. Not weapons, warnings. Murmuration screamed protocols in every band. Civilian lanes, sanctuary law, maritime code older than anyone on the screen. The incoming cruiser didn't blink. Harkin didn't ask permission. Boarding clause, he said to his own line. 8 rock cutters jumped short on purpose and bit into the cruiser's hull like ticks. Harkin's troopers moved in a blur of vacuum discipline. Cut power here, wedge hatches there, pin a bridge crew without making widows. They fought for control, not coronation. On Naomi's plot, the suicide vector drifted, then slewed hard toward a safe arc. Anchor 7 stabilized, Nav said, voice shaking. Naomi let her breath out. Broadcast the charter, she told comms. All of it, not as threat, as offer. Open gate bones for evacuation to neutral ground. Anti-Lael. Already spinning kitchens, Lael said. We're dropping hot soup and comm tabs to the rooftops. If they shoot at soup, their mothers will hear about it. The city's lights rippled. Not blackout, people leaning out windows, neighbors passing news. Welcome Beacon was a logistics operation dressed as a miracle. Murmurations, holds emptied into the sky in tidy descents. Food, med kits, little terminals chirping. Ask for what you need, it's not a trap. Then the trap sprung elsewhere. Admiral, Ops called. We're seeing jamming in the harmony band, origin inside our formation. Naomi's neck went cold. Source, looks like a choir ship. Signature matches Bloom at noon. One of their earliest friends, Court of Dawn's body dimmed to grief. That voice has been quiet. We feared fracture. The oppressors taught some of us to sing alone. The jam grew teeth, gnawing at the mercy tuning of the defense grid. If it went narrowband spike, the hospitals would black out to feed the guns. Naomi could kill the jamming node, 2 taps and a beam, but it was a choir hull and there were people inside who had chosen wrong for reasons she refused to call simple. Board them, Naomi said. No shots, hearken. I will go, the rock said. They may hear me where they would not hear you. Murmuration, Naomi added. Hold formation and keep the anchor behind your shadow. She stared through the glass at the planet that had been taught to fear its own neighbors. On the scopes, Bloom at noon spun up a last spike. Naomi's fingers hovered over a red key she had sworn to treat like a landmine. The grid twitched, and the city below held its breath as every NICU monitor counted down in guilty decimals. Boarders inside the choir hull, comms reported. Harkin's suit cam, ma'am, he's singing. Of course he was. Of course the man who had left Conquest for consonants would choose to carry a tune into a fight. For a heartbeat, it sounded like static on Naomi's speakers. Then it became something older than any of them, a soldier trying to match a chord he had no right to own, reaching for it anyway. The spike faded. Bloom at noon shuttered its own light in shame. The grid's appetite eased back from lethal. Jamming ceased. Ops said in the tone of someone watching a child breathe again. Hold broadcasts, Naomi said. Keep soup on the way. Admiral, Nav whispered. New contact, very large, vectoring not for us for Anchor 3. Naomi's hand stopped just short of trembling. By who? Accord failsafe. They're going to collapse the gate on their own city. She felt the old stoic sentence in her bones. Some things are up to us, some aren't. Then we make a third category, she said. Things that will be up to us if we sprint. Sprinting a fleet is ugly. You can't ask 1,000 hulls to leap like one muscle without spraining something. But Murmuration had practiced chaos until it looked like choreography. Braids 4 and 7 with me, Naomi said. Everyone else, hold beacon posture. No one shoots a hospital to protect a gate. Anchor 3 hung over the polar sea like a lantern, its edges shimmering from the choir's careful hum. The failsafe coming for it wore a civilian transponder wrapped around a bomb. The Accord loved naming things Custodian to make you forget what they did. Custodian 19 accelerated in a line that told Naomi there was a human on its bridge who had decided to break their world in order to keep it tidy. Murmuration to Custodian 19, she said, calm as a clean cut. Stand down. We will stabilize your orbit. You can blame me in the morning. Your family will still have a morning. No reply, cold discipline in the vector. She hated admiring it. Can we catch it? Her XO asked. We can sing the gate path, Cord of Dawn said, but we would need a human attention to split its intention. 2 eyes, 1 choice. Amandi, Naomi called to engineering. If we bleed the bow shield and pour that into the braids, how long do we get before we cook? 38 seconds, Amandi said, too fast. 40 if you want me to lie. We'll take 38, Naomi said. Auntie. Already told the kitchens to bolt the pots, Lael said. We'll ride out the rattle. They flipped the ship into a posture no academy would teach. Heat strobed along Murmuration's crystal ribs, warning lights became constellations. Naomi pinned her hand to the armrest and felt the deck complain. On the scope, Custodian 19 grew. Rock boarding claws can't bite at that speed, Harkin reported. We will just die with them. Naomi didn't want anyone to die with anyone. Cord, she said, teach me the split. You will see a path like a river fork, the choir sang. Choose the shallower pain. Stoics would have clapped later at how plain that sounded. She pressed her palm to the choir relay. A harmonic opened behind her eyes. The great iris of Anchor 3 dilated, then narrowed, then bled 2 threads of probability into the black. Naomi tasted tin. On my mark, she said. Now. The gate twinned itself. The failsafe met a mirror. Custodian 19 hiccuped at a universe that dared to make a third option. It skated left, then right. The shallower pane forked it into a tumble that missed the gate by 100 meters and tore a chunk off Murmuration's nose instead of a city's winter. The shock rolled through the fleet like a bad chord in a choir. Naomi tasted copper and swallowed the urge to curse. Damage. 2 decks hold, engineering said. We lost the forward galley. A pause. Auntie Lael is fine. Very loud, but fine. Mute her, Naomi said, and Lael's operatic complaints cut down to a faint, cheerful mutter about ruined saffron. Anchor 3 steadied. Emergency crews burned across vacuum, patching Murmuration like a sail in a storm. Naomi allowed herself 1 hard breath. Status on Bloom at noon. Harkin's face appeared again, visor speckled with light. Their captain weeps, he said without contempt. He says he learned a solo as a boy that made him feel large, and men with uniforms told him to sing it until his friends went hungry. He will face whatever your charters say. Our charters say repair the harm, Naomi said. Not the man. We can argue about the man later. Ops flagged a groundside channel. Admiral City Controller on Accord Prime requests direct line. Name Ilya CERN. Civilian authority. She's been rerouting power to hospitals behind the grid's back. Put her through. The face that came up was tired and unremarkable in the dignified way of people who keep a city standing for 10 years without anyone writing them poems. Commodore Reese, CERN said, braced for violence. If I drop the grid, can you keep the sky polite? I can keep my side polite, Naomi said. Can you keep yours? CERN's mouth tilted toward humor and away from doom. I can keep 3 districts from panicking and 2 from rioting. The 6th will do whatever the old men in its council hall tell them because they paved the road last spring and nobody forgets a fresh road. Can you deliver bread faster than fear? Watch, Naomi said. She pointed, and the beacon earned its name. Wanderer platforms unreeled chutes. Choir ships sang boxes gentle to rooftops. Rock cutters laid down corridors for ambulances that hadn't gone this fast since the last earthquake. Naomi didn't send soldiers to intersections. She sent carpenters. People remembered that longer. CERN watched for 10 minutes without speaking. Then, dropping the grid, light washed off orbitals like a sigh. Accord warships floated, suddenly very mortal. A junior officer on someone's bridge reached for a firing switch out of habit and found nothing to do. Harkin's cutters hovered beside them like patient dogs waiting to hear if strangers were friendly. Naomi's comms team counted the surrenders like beads. 37, then 42, then 100. We're getting citizen messages. Ops added. Questions, complaints, recipes. Someone sent a photo of soup with the note, "This tastes like my grandmother arguing." Tell them we take that as a compliment, Naomi said. Then the last hardline answered itself. The tidy admiral appeared, eyes like ceiling lights. You've made your point, she said, but you've also violated 1,000 protocols. The Accord cannot accept an invitation from pirates. Naomi didn't dress the truth. We came to end camps and open gates. If your law kept those cages tidy, it was bad law. We're not here to take your world. We're here to give it back to its people. It was always theirs, the admiral snapped. We merely supervised. And if we ask the people, Naomi said mildly, will they say your supervision tasted like cinnamon or cordite? The admiral cut the line. Failsafe coils arming, Tactical said quietly. She just keyed a deadman in the upper yards. If she dies or panics, the orbital coils discharge into the atmosphere. Into the city, CERN said flat as stone. My city. Naomi looked at Court of Dawn. Can we sing a deadman gentle? We can try, the choir said, but it will want to be loud. Then we will be louder at being quiet, Naomi said, and set her fleet to the strangest task of the war. An orchestra saving a skyline. They called every ship that could hold a tune. Choir harmonists took the lead, but human musicians dragged old instruments out of lockers. Violins bowed with a careful wrist to find a pitch the coils would respect. A trumpet muted to a hum. A child's recorder piping one clear note that made a tech on Deck 7 weep without knowing why. Rock warriors on watch hummed along badly and with heart. The Wanderers tuned their engine noise, dropping RPM until it matched the frequency Anti-Lail swore calmed screaming toddlers. Failsafe will trigger if it hears panic, Court of Dawn warned. Give it cooperation. Naomi thought of the firebreak lines in California summers, neighbors with shovels, a steel edge and a human heartbeat. She flattened her voice until it held the same simple steadiness. We're going to make a new rule, she told the sky. This city gets to survive. Amandi ran numbers like rosary beads. If we phase the coils into each other, they'll cancel, he said. If we miss, they'll harmonize and turn the upper layers into lightning. I've always liked a tightrope, Naomi said. I dislike falling. CERN's voice cut in from the ground, dry and brave. We'll cut every non-essential draw. We'll hold still like a child under a doctor's hand. Make it fast, Commodore. In 5 minutes, the district with the fresh road will get bored and break something. Harkin appeared on the bridge in person, having abandoned a dozen urgent things with the serene confidence of a man who had trained good lieutenants. We have taken the tidy admiral alive, he said. Her hand shakes, but she will not call off the coil. I can duel her in the old style and call it honor. Your honor isn't a hostage, Naomi said. Let her live long enough to attend a council where she has to hear people say no to her. That will hurt worse. He barked a laugh, surprised. You understand warriors. I understand humans, she said, not adding that he'd become one long before he realized. The first coil started to sing. It was a bad note, metallic and thin. The fleet answered with something round. Monitors leveled, sparks crawled along scaffolds and died like old grudges cooling. Auntie Lael's kitchens sent up a steam that turned the coil's plasma arcs into harmless ghost light. For 10 long heartbeats, the deadman tried to be a dead god and found the room already full. Discharge canceled. Engineering reported. Voice hushed as if in a cathedral. On the ground, people clapped from rooftops without knowing what they were applauding. CERN laughed, then hid it, then laughed again. You just got a city to hum in tune, she said. How long can you keep them humming? Long enough to vote, Naomi said. Then it's their job to keep tempo. Then you'll want a hall, CERN said. And a gavel. I have both and no desire to use either ever again. In the same hour, the beacon became what Naomi had promised. A commons. Not a parliament yet. Nothing with embossed seals. Just a room, a charter on a wall, and a line at the microphone. A grandmother spoke first and told the tidy admiral that rules written by men who had never missed a meal were easy to respect until the cupboard emptied. A young rock pilot spoke second and apologized for the cages, then asked to be put on trash duty because atonement shouldn't wear medals. A choir child held up a lattice toy and asked if the city could have more bridges. Yes, CERN said thickly. Yes, you can. Harkin tugged at Naomi's sleeve. Warriors from my home want an oath, he said, half apology, half need. A thing to hang their new lives on. Write it, Naomi said. Make it about who we defend, not what we take. He stood beside the microphone and said an oath with the clean spareness of a blade set down point first into dirt. We fight so children sleep. We break what breaks them. We do not make cages, we break locks. We sing badly when needed. The last line made the room laugh and remember the coils. Oaths are kept when they are a little ridiculous. It gives the conscience a handle. Then the comms board lit with an old evil. Accord hardliners leaked edited footage of the beacon as invasion. Wanderer platforms composited into monstrous silhouettes. Rock cutters painted as raiders dropping fire. The tidy admiral's staff routed it through 1,000 whisper channels. People who had relaxed their shoulders began to tense again. Naomi didn't counter with clean, harder footage. She sent something stranger. Receipts. Camp budgets, burials, invoices for stabilization devices that looked like shackles. CERN co-signed. Harkin added logs with his own signature, the curve of it a small penance. Auntie Lael posted a photograph of soup pots dented by the murmuration hit and wrote, "If this is invasion, we're doing it wrong." The hardliners triggered their last lever. A courier arrived from the Accord's inner circle carrying a challenge. Trial by combat in orbit, old law invoked as spectacle, obvious trap. If Naomi refused, they'd call the commons cowards. If she accepted, they'd stage a martyrdom and harvest fear. She wanted to laugh it off. Then she remembered how cultures pivot on rituals, not white papers. "We'll meet it," she told Harkin, "but we change the game." "How?" he asked, delighted. "Trial by competence," Naomi said. "No blood. We build in a day what they couldn't plan in a decade." The beacon room approved by roar. The hardliners, smug, named a site in the old docklands littered with bureaucratic debris and promises. Naomi named a deadline, one planetary rotation. She set the choir to singing girders and the wanderers to laying conduit and the rock to hauling sheet after sheet, with the grinning stamina of people who finally understood where their strength belonged. Auntie Lael opened a mess that fed anyone with a shovel. At Lunar Rise, the old docklands had a clinic. At dawn, they had a school. At noon, they had a council hall with battered benches and good acoustics. At dusk, an Accord dignitary arrived to oversee the combat and found a line of citizens signing up for night classes in civics and welding, taught by the same people. "Your move," Naomi told the cameras. The dignitary stared at a schedule board papers couldn't eat. "We didn't bring a building," he managed. "We noticed," CERN said sweetly. The crowd laughed. The dignitary's comm crackled with angry instructions. He took his earpiece out and after a conflicted breath put it in his pocket. Across orbit a relay hummed. "Admiral," Ops said, "one more lever. They're going to cut the planet off from gate bones, burn the local node. If they can't have this world, no one will." Naomi felt the fatigue in her bones and the discipline in her spine. "Then we'll do what we came to do," she said. "We'll hold open the door while they throw a tantrum." Gatebone Node 1 lived under a ridge of old iron, half fossil, half future, ringed with Accord watchers who had never needed to understand what they were guarding. The hardliners' demolition squads rolled in with serious faces and toolboxes shaped like confessionals. From orbit, the commons could see their heat signatures, the frantic bustle of men certain of permission. "Options?" Naomi asked. "3, Armandi said. "We can move the node by singing its frame into new phase, but we risk breaking it forever. We can protect it and endure a siege, but the city will starve of hope before they starve of food. Or, Naomi prompted, "or we teach the city to keep its own gate," he said softly. "We've been treating the choir like a choir and not like neighbors. We can give away the song." Court of Dawn glowed with a fear that looked like pride's shadow. "Old law says we keep the deep song close, but old law was written in a quiet meadow, not in a world of cages." Naomi didn't decide for them. "Your sovereignty," she said. "We can defend you while you decide. We can also." "We will sing," the choir said, and the room went silent. "We will teach." They opened the gatebone room not just to technicians but to bakers and bus drivers, grandmothers and a mechanic with oil to his elbows. Court of Dawn stood on a crate and explained harmonics like sourdough, like learning a muscle you forgot you had. Children picked up the tone faster than anyone. Someone remembered a lullaby that fit the third overtone like a key. The demolition team set their charges. CERN rerouted a maintenance tram. At the last turn, the tram driver found her track blocked by 100 neighbors humming into the dark, and she set the brake and cried and later would call it the best day of her life. Arm in 30, an Accord foreman called. Fire on the half. Sing now, Court of Dawn said. They did. The gate answered a chorus it had been waiting centuries to hear. The charges detonated into a foam of mistaken math. The ridge shook and did not fall. The node shifted its ligaments to a different angle upon existence and outgrew the wires meant to kill it. The foreman took his helmet off and stared as if the world had moved his chair while he wasn't looking. We made a commons, CERN whispered, as if not to scare it away. Hold it, Naomi said. Holding is a verb. On orbit, the tidy admiral stood on a platform surrounded by her now disarmed coils and watched transmissions climb a curve that didn't include her anymore. Harkin brought her to the window. You can be first to resign or last, he said. It is still a kind of courage. She looked at the city, the soup, the school in the docklands where a boy was learning to weld a line as straight as law should be. She set her badge down as if it weighed a hunt. Armies don't dissolve because someone makes a speech. They dissolve because the quartermaster signs the other form and the bus routes change, and the nurses get the shift they asked for, and the men with tidy hair find the room already full. Over 3 days, the Accord's apparatus unwound with the slow grace of people who had finally been offered a different job than guarding doors against their neighbors. Naomi didn't let the beacon become gloating. They put up a wall of names, not fallen enemies, but people rescued, people still missing, people to find tomorrow. The wall grew until it needed a plaza, and the plaza needed a name, and someone wrote the place we kept promises in chalk, and nobody erased it. Cost asked for its due. Murmuration limped for a month. 2 choir ships never came back from the ground because teaching is a risk. A ROC lieutenant slipped and broke a knee and laughed about it for the rest of his life, and also never ran fast again. Auntie Lael mourned a spice crate as if it were a cousin. They held a wake and served stew. When the Accord finally called it negotiations, Naomi refused a raised dais. She stood in the Dockland Hall built in a day and set the Commons Charter on a table you could scratch with a coin. Equal vote for member peoples, she said. No forced labor and no shadow debts. Open tech with safeguards we can explain to a teenager. Gate bones belong to the worlds that tend them. Military service points outward at exploitation, not inward at dissent. Anyone can leave. Anyone can return. It wasn't new. It was older than any of their ships. It was the covenant neighbors make when they see each other every morning at a fence and decide not to sharpen it. Hardliners sputtered and resigned. Pragmatists shrugged and calculated new angles. 1,000 small states sent messages that said, in essence, we've been waiting for someone to tell us we weren't crazy. Harkin wrote to his mother. The silicate choir carved music into the Dockland Hall's beams and called it architecture. CERN slept for 14 hours and then ran for city council, and then asked an exhausted Naomi to write the oath. She wrote one sentence: "You will leave more kindness than you had requisitioned." At dusk on the final day, the beacon dimmed to everyday. The fleet stayed in orbit as long as it took to make staying unnecessary. Naomi stood on Murmuration's repaired nose with Amandi and Court of Dawn and Auntie Lael, who refused to wear a suit and bullied the air into treating her politely. Harkin saluted and didn't make it martial. It was an acknowledgement of shared foolishness done well. You built a thing without owning it, Amandi said. That's advanced engineering. It's just a bridge, Naomi said, looking at the iris of gatebone light over the city like a second moon. We learned to build those a long time ago. Where to next? Auntie Lael asked, because kitchens hate standing still. Where the maps are rude, Naomi said. Where the memos say custodial and mean cage. Where the old men paved a road last spring and think that buys them a winter of obedience. Harkin's laugh rolled through the suit audio. And if we find a place that wants the old order, then we let them have it, Naomi said. On their land with their consent without export. Freedom is frightening because it lets people be wrong in peace. Below, in the docklands, a girl practiced welding a straight seam under the eye of a grandmother with a stopwatch. The line she laid down looked, to Naomi's tired eyes, exactly like a horizon. The beacon fleet turned on gentle axes and slid toward the next roomer. As they went, the choir sang a traveling song that made the ribs of murmuration feel warm for the first time since Pharaoh's. The comm board ticked with new requests and old thank yous and midnight recipes for soup that tasted like arguing kindly. Somewhere, an old law died of embarrassment. Somewhere else, a new custom took its first breath. They had not conquered a capital. They had convinced it. The cost would be on their ledgers for a long time. The gains would be on everyone's table every day they kept the promise. And if anyone forgot why it mattered, there would be a place by the water where names were written and soup was served, and children learned to hum a gate open because someone had decided the door belonged to them. The fleet's formation lights pulsed once, twice, like a heartbeat, like applause politely offered to the future. Then the gate bones dilated, bright as irises in sunlight, and 1,000 ships went a stand where the next door needed to be held.